had a number of different hats within the org. So I got involved in 2019 because I knew the co-founder Connor from high school. So I grew up in Westboro, and so him and I had just like seen on social media that he was posting about break time and said that he was starting this nonprofit to work with young adult homelessness, and it was something that I thought was a really great opportunity and something that I wanted to learn more about. And so I just reached out to him and got involved. And at that point, it was all just college age students kind of working part-time. I was at UMass Amherst at the time. Connor and his co-founder were at Harvard, so we were all kind of across the state and just working virtually. And what we were doing primarily at that point was just fundraising, because we had the idea that we wanted to create a sort of job training program for young adults experiencing homelessness, but we did not have any of the funding necessary to do that. So 2019 was really just fundraising for the most part. And so I was on the development team, and we were just working to raise as much money as we possibly could. And the original concept for Break Time was to open up the Break Time Cafe, where we would have jobs just at the cafe. So young adults experiencing homelessness would come in and they would work, like a barista shift. And then after the barista shift, they would do a training on how to build your resume, how to do a job interview. And the original idea was that they would happen kind of in tandem. And so we signed the lease for a first floor retail space over right by North Station. And then COVID happened. So we had to totally pivot everything that we were doing, because I don't think opening up a coffee shop in the middle of the pandemic would have been a smart idea. We now do it so the first 3 weeks that people are with Break Time, it's all just the training aspect. And then once they graduate from that, they transition into the second phase of our program, which is called Liftoff, and that's where we will place them at one of our employment partners, and they will work there for 15 weeks. And so the intersection between homelessness and food insecurity and just like, having a place to shower, and you really need those basic needs to be able to be successful at any employment site, right? Like how are you gonna get up and go to your job if you are feeling unsafe where you're living, or you don't have those basic needs? So that's really a huge part of what we do as well. And all of our employees that come through Break Time or not employees, but all of our program participants that come through Break Time are matched with one of our social workers. So we don't do a ton on the org level of saying each person gets a stipend for food. We don't do anything like that. The work we do is more kind of on an individual basis. So all of our social workers are trained on different resources across Massachusetts or across the city. So if someone comes to them and says, hey, I'm really struggling, I don't think I'm going to be able to pay my rent, I don't know where I'm going to get my next meal, the social worker can work with them and try to identify resources that could help them get out of that situation. It's a good question, and it's tough, particularly on the funding side of things. There's definitely a lot of funders that do kind of like to have one niche. So primarily, some funders will really focus on just the food insecurity piece. Some funders really like to focus on the workforce partnerships. We get a lot of funding from banks and financial institutions, and they all just want to see workforce development and economic development and go hand in hand. And I think it's really difficult to separate them, because all of those things really are it's such an intersectional issue. And I think it's even hard to separate it from race, gender, LGBTQ status. I think all of those things factor in, and I think it definitely is best when it's thought about holistically rather than kind of focusing on the individual pieces. Yeah, I think it does generally go hand in hand, because I think that is what people generally, that's just kind of what the reality of the situation is. So I think most of the time it's pretty standard. I mean, in terms of access, like, it definitely is challenging. In particular, the reason that we focus on the 18 to 24-year-old age bracket is because there's a lot of programs for, like, 10 to 18, like, teenagers and children. But we've found that there aren't really as many programs for that young adult age range. And a lot of the people coming into our program are folks who are coming out of the foster care system. So they have been in the foster care system their whole life, have aged out, and now they don't have a family, they don't have a support network. And, they just turn 18 and they're like, I don't know what to do now and where to go from here. So that's definitely been a gap that we've identified, and that's why we primarily focus on that age. And now, because we are such a young organization, our focus is mostly in Boston. But ideally, the next 5 to 10 years, we'd love to expand kind of across the state. But for now, yeah, most of our focus has been in Boston. Referrals, so from organizations like YWI, More Than Words, and then also other shelters that aren't specific to young adults experiencing homelessness, but would still kind of see people coming in the door and be able to refer them to us. Is mostly shelters that we're referring people over, because a lot of shelters too have requirements that say if you stay at that shelter, you need to have a job or have something to kind of prove that you are actively, like, working towards something. So if folks come in who are in that age bracket and they don't have that, they can refer them over to Break Time. So that has been kind of traditionally where most of our people have come from, is those referrals. But with the growth of the community outreach team, one of our goals has really been to build connections with, like, local community centers and other organizations. And so the team they do, like, info sessions at different community orgs, and really just try to get connected with people across Boston and across, like, the neighboring cities as well. So definitely something that we're kind of continuing to grapple with, but I think viewing it from this approach has definitely been more successful, and our numbers have been a lot higher than they were for last year. Education is really kind of the first step, and I think especially around homelessness, there's a lot of, like, negative stereotypes around what people think of when they think of particularly, like, young adults experiencing homelessness, and the population that we serve, you wouldn't necessarily even know that they were homeless if you just, like, met them or first had a conversation with them. It's not kind of what you think of as someone, like, begging on the street. Like, I think there's a lot of misconceptions around just, like, the general issue of homelessness. So I think that education piece is really the biggest thing. Yeah, I think best part for me is definitely the people in the community. I think on our staff and with the young adults that we work with, I feel like I have just learned and grown so much as a person from just, like, having conversations and interactions with everyone. We have a really diverse staff of people that come from different backgrounds. Like, we have all our social workers, but then, we're still a business, so we have, like, our finance people and our development people. So there's kind of people that come from a whole different industries and different experiences that kind of led them to Break Time. And I think generally speaking, like, people that are on our team and work at nonprofits in general are just generally people who, really care about the mission and really are just passionate about what they're doing. And it is always just so inspiring to be able to connect with folks. The positive emotions outweigh the negative emotions, but I think as a whole, it's a very emotionally taxing field to be in.